Started feeling strange every month despite taking pills until I found out my mother-in-law had replaced them with sugar tablets because she wanted a grandchild and didn't care about my consent or safety anymore. I used to think the worst betrayal was from strangers, or maybe friends who walked away or lovers who shattered your heart, but I never thought betrayal could be possible from someone who smiled every morning, someone who told you that they loved you like a daughter while masterminding my life in the negative from the inside out, and me not even realizing it until far too late. Until the pain was done, and there was no possible way to unpick what she had so masterfully constructed in the shadows. I had always known my husband's mother was stubborn, and yes, a little bit overbearing, always wanting to do everything, always offering unsolicited advice and hovering a bit too close, but I wrote it off as cultural differences, maybe her way of demonstrating love, and I made an effort. God knows I made an effort. To be patient, to be understanding, to include her, to never make her feel left behind. Even when we were married and moved into a little house of our own, she still visited every day, cooked for us, cleaned things I'd already cleaned, reorganized my kitchen cabinets, bought furniture we did not need, and whenever I vacillated or pushed back even a little bit, she would play the hurt card or break out the tears, and my husband, he would just sigh and tell me to just let it go, that she meant well, that she was only trying to help, and so I remained silent more often than not, biting back my tongue and allowing her to take little bits of control here and there because it was easier than fighting, and because I wanted to think that she wasn't doing it on purpose. But things began to change after our anniversary rolled around again and the questions about babies started, and not mild curiosity, but full-blown obsession. She would drop hints constantly, ask if I was sick or queasy, offer me herbal tea and advice about fertility, show me pictures of her friends' babies and say how she couldn't wait to be a grandmother, how she waited her whole life for this, and when I explained gently that we were not ready, that we had talked about waiting another couple of years until we were more settled in money and in feeling, her face would set and her tone would change and she would say things like, "You'll regret waiting," or "What if you can't later?" And then she started saying things to my husband when I wasn't around, things I didn't hear until much later. Telling him I was selfish, that I didn't respect our family's traditions, that I didn't love him enough to carry his child, planting these seeds of resentment in him without me realizing, and meanwhile I was doing everything right, tracking my cycle, taking my birth control, having open conversations with him about our plans, but I started to notice little things. My period became irregular. I felt strange at times, dizzy or exhausted, my emotions were up and down, and I chalked it up to stress or maybe a reaction to the pills, until one day during a routine checkup I casually mentioned it to my doctor and asked if the brand could be affecting me differently, and when they tested the hormone levels in my blood and said there were none, absolutely none, my heart sank and I remember just sitting there stunned, blinking in confusion as the doctor asked if I had missed any pills, and I told them I hadn't, not once, and I didn't understand what was happening. I felt my skin go cold because something was wrong, very wrong, and when I got home that day I tore through the drawer where I kept my pills, opened the blister pack and held it up to the light, trying to see something, anything, and then I checked the box and the lot number, and it didn't match the prescription I had picked up a month before. I remember my hands shaking so badly I dropped the whole box on the floor and the pills scattered everywhere, and I sat there in the middle of the hallway just staring at them like they might give me an answer, and a sick thought crept into my mind. What if someone had switched them? What if they weren't real? What if someone didn't want me to be protected, and the only person who had regular access to our home, who had unpacked my groceries, who insisted on organizing my drawers, who handled my laundry whenever she visited, was her? And even though it sounded insane to think, I couldn't shake the suspicion. So I took the pills and I went to the pharmacy and asked them to verify if they were legitimate, and the pharmacist frowned and said these weren't active, that they looked like over-the-counter sugar pills, placebos, completely ineffective for birth control, and in that moment it felt like the air was sucked out of my lungs, like the room tilted sideways and I had to grip the counter just to stay upright because that wasn't a mistake, that was deliberate. Someone had replaced my pills and it was her, it had to be her. Because no one else had touched them and suddenly everything clicked. The way she kept asking about babies, how she watched me like a hawk, how she had mentioned once in passing that sometimes fate needs a little help. And I thought she was joking, but she wasn't, and I went home and confronted her. I was shaking and trying not to scream and I asked her, straight out, if she had touched my pills, and she didn't deny it, not right away. Instead she gave me this calm, almost smug smile and said, "You're young, you'll thank me one day." And I lost it. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She had taken away my choice, my control over my own body, and she didn't even seem sorry. She acted like it was some noble sacrifice, some wise intervention, and when I turned to my husband for support, for outrage, for protection, he looked conflicted, like he didn't know which side to take, and that's when I realized how deep her manipulation had gone, that she had twisted his loyalty so tightly that he didn't even see what she had done as a violation, and he said things like, "Maybe it's a sign," and "Maybe it was meant to be." And I felt like I was going insane, like no one could see what was happening to me and I was alone in this nightmare where my own family didn't respect my body or my decisions or my autonomy. And I remember locking myself in the bathroom that night and sobbing until my face was raw and my chest hurt and I couldn't breathe through my nose because I didn't know what to do, whether to run or fight or beg or scream, and every part of me felt violated, like I had been touched without consent, like someone had crawled inside my life and rearranged the furniture of my future without asking. And the worst part was knowing she was just down the hall, probably sleeping soundly, thinking she had done the right thing. I didn't sleep at all that night, not a single minute. I just lay there in the dark with my eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sound of my own breathing while my husband lay beside me like nothing had happened, like the earth hadn't just split beneath our marriage, and I kept wondering how long she'd been planning this, how many times she had watched me take those fake pills and smiled to herself thinking she'd won. And I wanted to scream, to wake him up and make him see what this was, that this wasn't some innocent mistake or loving gesture, it was manipulation, it was sabotage, it was control dressed up as care, and I felt this rage building inside me, not just at her but at him too, for letting it happen, for not defending me, for not seeing me when I needed him the most. And the next morning when she made breakfast like nothing had happened, humming in the kitchen and setting the table for 3, I just stared at her like she was a stranger, like I had never really known her at all, because the woman I thought I was trying to build a bridge with had been quietly tearing down the walls around my body, brick by brick, until I was exposed and powerless and too stunned to fight back. And when I told her she had crossed the line, that she had betrayed me in a way I could never forgive, she just looked hurt and said, "I was only thinking of the family." As if that justified everything, as if the word family gave her permission to override my consent. And I couldn't stop shaking. I felt nauseous, like there was poison in my bloodstream and I couldn't flush it out. And when I tried to get my husband to understand, to stand beside me, he just sat there with his hands in his lap and said, "Let's not make a big deal out of this." And I swear something inside me cracked open in that moment, something small but vital, like a piece of trust that would never grow back. And I realized he wasn't going to protect me, that he was more afraid of upsetting her than of losing me. And suddenly I saw our whole future flash before me. Not one of love and partnership, but of compromise after compromise, of being outnumbered in my own home, of watching my decisions slowly disappear under the weight of someone else's expectations. And I knew I had to get out of that house, even just for a while, so I packed a small bag, my hands trembling the whole time, and told him I needed space. That I couldn't breathe with her there, and he followed me to the door, asking me not to do this, saying I was overreacting, saying she didn't mean any harm, but that was the thing. She did, and the fact that he couldn't see that was almost more painful than what she had done, because I had trusted him to be my partner, to be the one person who would always have my back, and in that moment he chose her, not in words but in silence, in hesitation, in the way he didn't stop her or hold her accountable, and I left without saying goodbye to her, without looking back, because if I did, I knew I would crumble. And I went to stay with a friend, someone who didn't ask too many questions at first, who just gave me a cup of tea and a quiet space to sit and feel everything. And once the shock wore off, the grief came in waves. Grief for the trust that was broken, for the relationship I thought I had, for the illusion of safety that had been ripped away, and I kept replaying everything in my mind, the small signs I ignored, the moments I let slide, all the times I tried to be polite when I should have drawn a boundary, and I hated that I had been made to feel like I was crazy for wanting control over my own body, for wanting to decide when or if I became a mother, and I started to realize just how deep this betrayal cut. Because it wasn't just about the pills, it was about the message behind it. That I didn't matter, that my voice didn't count, that my life was just a vessel for someone else's timeline. And the more I thought about it, the more I understood that going back would mean erasing myself piece by piece until there was nothing left. And after a few days, he called me crying, saying he missed me, that he wanted to fix things. And part of me ached to hear that, part of me still loved him. Still remembered the version of us that used to laugh in bed and plan a future together. But another part of me, the part that was tired of shrinking, asked him one simple question. Do you understand what she did? And then she hung up on him, and there was a long silence on the other end of the phone before he said, I don't think she meant to hurt you. And that was my response, because even after everything, he was still saying her was better than me, and I told him I couldn't come back, not unless there were real changes, real accountability, and he said he wouldn't have to choose either way, that I was making him choose between his mother and his wife, and maybe I was, but I wasn't the one who made that choice. She was, the moment she made my body hers to control, and after that phone call I wept harder than I ever thought I could, because it felt like the end of something beautiful, and for a while I blamed myself for loving him still and wondering what could have been, but the truth is, love alone isn't enough, not when it's covered in silence, not when it's weighed down by people who can't see your pain, and so slowly I started to rebuild, to make distance not just physically but emotionally, to trust my instincts again and stop apologizing for needing boundaries, and I went back to my doctor, got back on real birth control, and made sure everything was right. And when she asked if I wanted to press charges or report what had happened, I said no. I didn't have the strength for a fight, and what I wanted wasn't vengeance, it was peace, and I finally started to find it, not all at once, but in small moments, like waking up in a space that was actually mine, like cooking dinner for myself without someone standing over my shoulder, like looking in the mirror and seeing someone who survived something insidious and found a way forward. The hardest part wasn't leaving the house or packing the bag or even telling him that I couldn't come back. Not really, not in the way people might think. It was the quiet moments after, the ones no one prepares you for, like walking past a baby store window and feeling my stomach twist, or hearing someone talk about how wonderful their mother-in-law is and forcing a smile while my chest burned with something sharp and bitter because even if I never got pregnant from what she did, the damage had already taken root. And it grew in places I didn't expect, like the way I started second-guessing myself about everything, wondering if maybe I had been too cold, too rigid, too closed off, and that guilt. It's like rust, slow and quiet and persistent, and I hated that she still had that kind of power over me, even from a distance, even after everything, and I would lie in bed and remember the early days, when I first met her, and she gave me a necklace and said I was the daughter she never had, and I believed her. I wanted to believe her. I was so naive. So hungry to be accepted that I missed all the red flags waving right in front of my face, like how she would joke about how I needed to fatten up for pregnancy, or how she would clean the house after I'd already done it, as if my work didn't count, and it's so clear now, painfully clear, that all of it was about control, about slowly nudging me into the role she wanted me to play, docile, grateful, fertile. And when I didn't comply, she took matters into her own hands, and I kept thinking, what kind of person does that? What kind of woman undermines another woman's body like that? And worse, what kind of man stands by and lets it happen? And that question haunted me the most, because I didn't marry her, I married him, and he was supposed to be my safe place, the one person I could count on. And yet when everything came crashing down, he chose to preserve her feelings over my safety, and I kept wondering if he really loved me or if he just loved the idea of me as a wife who would fall into line, who wouldn't ask too many questions or push back too hard. And those thoughts, they hurt more than anything she did, because they made me doubt the very foundation of our marriage, and it wasn't just sadness I felt, it was grief, deep grief for the life I thought I was building, for the trust one thought we had, for the dreams that now felt tainted and distant, and I'd sit in my friend's spare room at night and go over it all in my head like a courtroom drama, replaying every conversation, every warning sign, trying to make sense of it, trying to find some solid ground under the mess. And eventually I started therapy, not because I wanted to but because I needed to, because the spiral of doubt and shame was pulling me under, and in those quiet sessions with a woman who didn't know my name or history, I finally started to say the words I hadn't dared to say out loud. I feel violated, I feel betrayed, I feel like I was treated like a vessel and not a person, and she didn't flinch, she didn't minimize it or explain it away like everyone else had, she nodded and let me sit in that space and own what had happened, and for the first time, I started to feel a little less crazy, a little less alone, and through that process, I started to rebuild, not quickly, not dramatically, but slowly, patiently, like picking glass out of a wound, and I stopped taking his calls. After a while, stopped responding to the texts that said he missed me or wanted to talk, because the truth is, He had his chance to fight for me, to protect me, and he didn't, and no amount of "I'm sorry" could undo that moment when he looked me in the eye and couldn't say the words, "I believe you, I support you, I'll fix this." And months passed like that, slow and quiet, and then one day he showed up at my door unannounced, standing there with dark circles under his eyes and a bouquet of flowers in his hand, and I froze, because a part of me still wanted to believe he'd changed, that he'd seen the light and was ready to take accountability. But when I let him in and we sat down, the first words out of his mouth were, "She didn't know what she was doing." And just like that, whatever tiny flicker of hope I'd kept buried inside me was snuffed out, because he still didn't get it, still didn't understand that ignorance isn't an excuse, that good intentions don't erase harm, and I told him that, as calmly as I could, that love isn't enough without respect, without trust, without the willingness to stand up when things are wrong, and he looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time, like he realized I wasn't coming back, not this time. And maybe it broke his heart, but it had already broken mine, and I needed to choose myself now, fully, fiercely, without guilt or apology. And after he left, I stood there for a long time just staring at the closed door, feeling both hollow and whole at once, because letting go of him meant letting go of a life I had poured everything into, but it also meant reclaiming something sacred, my body, my voice, my future, and I knew, deep down, that I would never let anyone take that from me again. In the months that followed, I didn't rush to fill the silence he left behind. I didn't run out searching for someone new or try to cover the ache with distractions. I just sat with it, all of it, the grief, the rage, the betrayal, the confusion, and little by little I let myself feel every inch of it without judgment, because I knew if I tried to skip the pain, I'd never really heal, and healing wasn't glamorous. It wasn't candles and baths and inspirational quotes. It was ugly crying in the car. It was waking up in the middle of the night gasping from a nightmare. It was walking into a grocery store and getting hit with a scent that reminded me of her perfume and suddenly needing to leave my cart and go sit in the parking lot until the shaking stopped. And yet even in those brutal, broken moments, I could feel something in me hardening. Not in a bitter way, but in a protective way, like a scar forming over something too deep to forget, and eventually I moved into a place of my own, small and quiet, but mine, fully mine, and every time I locked the door behind me, I felt a tiny spark of safety I hadn't known I was missing, because even though she had never physically hurt me, the emotional violation had been so complete that I didn't trust the walls around me anymore. But now, here, in this space, I could breathe again, and I started to rebuild my routine. Not the one I had with him, but one that belonged to me, and for the first time in years, I made choices without explaining them to anyone. I cooked when I wanted to, I slept in if I needed to, I read books late into the night and took long showers and stood in front of the mirror studying my own face like it belonged to someone I was still getting to know, and one day I found the strength to throw away the old pill packets, the fake ones. The one she had swapped like it was nothing, and I didn't cry when I did it. I just felt this cold, clean sense of release, like I was finally severing the last thread that connected me to that nightmare. And later that week, my therapist asked me if I forgave her, and I had to pause, because the truth is, I don't know if I ever will. Maybe forgiveness isn't always the end goal. Maybe some things aren't meant to be forgiven, not because I want to stay angry, but because pretending it's okay when it's not is just another form of betrayal. And I've had enough of that to last me a lifetime. And when she reached out a few months later, asking to talk, to clear the air, I didn't respond, not out of spite, but because I knew no conversation could undo what she did, and more importantly, I didn't owe her that closure, not when she took mine without asking. And I think that's something people don't always understand. When someone violates you in such a personal, intimate way, healing doesn't always look like reconciliation. Sometimes it looks like distance, like silence, like building a life where they don't exist anymore. And that's okay, that's valid. And as for him, I haven't seen him since that last visit. I don't know if he stayed with her or moved out or finally opened his eyes. And part of me still aches for what we had, the version of us that existed before all of this. But that version only lived in the absence of truth, and once the truth came out, so did the cracks. And maybe that's the real lesson here, that love without respect is hollow, that family without boundaries is dangerous. And that sometimes the people who claim to love you the most are the ones who hurt you in ways you never thought possible. And now, when I look at my reflection, I see someone who came out the other side. Not untouched, not unscarred, but stronger, wiser, and deeply unwilling to ever be silent again. And if there's one thing I hope someone takes from hearing this, it's that your body is yours, your life is yours, And anyone who tries to take that from you, no matter how kind they seem or how close they are, doesn't deserve a place in your future, and you have every right to protect your peace, to draw the line, to walk away, and never look back.